Yo YouTube, hello and welcome to episode 3 of Draw for 20. I am your host, EyesOfTheFox, and today I drew Donatello, the third turtle, for episode 3. And you can see here, it's kind of the same deal as the other two. I start with my red line and kind of dig into it from there. Quick bit of trivia: Corey Feldman did the voice for Donatello in the first and third film. He did not record for the Secret of the Ooze. He was in rehab. I don't know how much people know about Corey Feldman, but he was kind of like the teen star icon of the 80s. I think he was in Gremlins. I think he was in The Goonies. He was in some other films as well. There was a whole thing with him and just abuse with children in entertainment industry. If you want to know more about that, just Google him. That information's out there. But I thought he did a really good job as the voice of Donatello. The only voices I found like kind of annoying, to be honest, was Raphael's, because he had, like, out of all the Ninja Turtles, he was the only one that had like a real New York accent, and he sounded like he was probably from like the Bronx or like the inner city somewhere. But Donatello was voiced by Corey Feldman. When I went back and watched the first film, I did notice the when Donatello laughs in a particular scene. I think the scene is when Raphael's in the tub and Leo's like kind of watching him, and April comes in and checks on him, and the other turtles kind of come in and they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" But somebody said something, and Donatello laughs and he opens the mouth, and you can see the person's eyes inside the head of the mask, inside the mouth. So he opens his mouth and there's like another set of eyes in there. It goes by super quick. You really don't notice it unless you're looking for it. I'm sure that the image is out there on Google somewhere. If you just Google like Donatello freaky eyes or something, you know, it'll come up with that image. Man, I did draw him a little bit taller than he should have been. When we get to the next video, I do shrink him down a little bit to kind of make him not as... I know he is taller than the other turtles, but I did shrink him down so he wasn't so like overpowering the others. I remember in the Leonardo video I did mention the arcade game, and I think somebody else had actually commented on the arcade as well. And I mentioned how in the arcade game you didn't want to use Michelangelo or Raphael because they had the shortest weapon range, and the hitboxes, as I mentioned previously, were connected to that range. So if you were playing the arcade game in the actual arcade using your quarters, you wanted to pick Donatello. Donatello had the longest range. Apparently he could do double damage, from what Gilbot9000 said in a comment. So if you had your quarters and you didn't have a lot of them and you didn't want to waste them, you pick Donatello. If he was taken, you pick Leonardo. Interesting story about that. When that arcade game came out, I forget exactly what year it was or exactly how old I was. I was probably like 5 or 6. But we used to have a place where I lived called Putt Putt Golf and Games, and it was like a little mini golf plus arcade. So like, you know, the adults would go and play their little mini golf, and the kids would just all hang out in the arcade and play video games. And I remember there being like a group of 3 probably high school kids at the time, and this was like late 80s, early 90s. So high school, and try to imagine, you know, your favorite early 90s, 80s film, high schoolers, and that's probably what they looked like. But there were 3 of them, and they were all around the original arcade cabinet for the Turtles. And I remember I was like, man, I really want to play, and there was one slot open. It was Raphael, and they wouldn't let me play. And I just kept watching them and watching them, and finally they get to like the last stage, and my stepdad comes over and he's like, hey, you know, there's an extra slot, just let him play. He's not gonna like mess you up. You guys are already like toward the end anyway. And so they're like, whatever, dude. And I get to play. I'm Raphael. He's like the worst turtle in the game. And they all die, and they all lose, and they're all out of quarters. And they don't just leave. They sit there and they watch me, because I'm the last turtle, the worst turtle in the game. And it's on the shredder. And the shredder is like the last boss of that game. And I think I had like a couple of bucks in quarters. And I think I died like a couple times. But I ended up beating the shredder with one character, Raphael, during that playthrough. These kids are like standing behind me. They're not even like, oh, great job, kid, or like, you know, you did really good, or like, you know, that's really cool. And yeah, they weren't like, they were just stone faced and mad. Like they just were mad that they didn't have the, basically it was pay to win. Like the more quarters you have, the longer you could play at the arcade. And they were out of quarters, so they didn't get to play. They didn't get to pay to win. And here I was, this kid coming in with his like $2 in quarters, and I let them do all the work and come in and swipe away the victory from them. Oh man. I wonder if they remember this. Those dudes are probably like in their 50s now, and I don't know if they ever watched that, but if you were one of those dudes and you were at putt-putt golfing games, and I was that little kid that came in and beat the game after you guys were out of quarters, I'm not sorry. You guys were kind of dicks at that time, excuse me. But yeah, it was just, I thought it was funny that they put all this time and money and effort into it, and then this little kid comes in and just swipes it from them. I don't think those places exist anymore, like the mini golf arcade places. It's really rare to see those. Sometimes I think about the like Defunct Land episodes on YouTube whenever I like go home and I drive past one of those places and it's all overgrown with weeds, and the giant creatures, like they had a giraffe I think, or in like a windmill and stuff like that, and it's just all overgrown with weeds and looks like something from a post-apocalyptic film. Just another reminder, another notch in your belt. Getting a little bit older, when the places you used to frequent as a child start to show their age or don't exist or even look older than they should be. Still drawing Donatello. I haven't really talked about it because it is, you know, kind of the same process with the red line, the black. He gave me a couple of problems at first. I think this is the second time lapse, or this particular time lapse was the second time I had started the video. I had started drawing him before and wasn't really happy with like the way he looked, so I actually like deleted that recording 7 minutes in, and no one's ever gonna get to see that, thank goodness. But yeah, just trying to keep with the sketchy look of it. I discovered the pencil I was using is just called Pencil. I think the pencil that I had referred to in the Raphael episode, where I called it the real pencil, I think that's the pencil that I had downloaded previously and forgot what it was. But after I reinstalled Clip Studio, I guess it makes you re-download those things. And I just wasn't sure where it was or what it was. So it's just the regular default pencil that comes with Clip Studio. It still fascinates me just watching the time lapse though. I think this one, the original recording was around the same time as Raphael. It was about 45 minutes or so. And we're about halfway through the time-lapse now. But the one coming up, because I actually recorded the time-lapse for Michelangelo after this one, and I'm recording the voiceover for that one tomorrow. But for the purpose of the video today, I'm recording the voiceover for Donatello. But yeah, I started to draw Mikey, and he was just like, oh man. I'll get into that story tomorrow when I post that video. But I never, growing up, as far as like my favorite turtles, I never really liked Donatello or Michelangelo. I was always like, man, Donatello's a freaking nerd, and Michelangelo's just too goofy. Like, he never took anything seriously. And so I couldn't relate to him because I wasn't highly intelligent at the time. I'm probably still not. I didn't really care about like technology when I was a kid, or really understand what it was, because there wasn't a lot of it. We had like a Nintendo. Oh man, the original Nintendo game for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was hard as it was the hardest game I think I ever played. And there was one part where you have to drive around in the little van and shoot missiles at roadblocks, and if you run out of missiles, you can't get rid of the roadblocks to advance through the rest of the game. And so that happened to me, and I don't know if there was like a sewer hole that was open that I could have gone in and gotten more of the missiles, but I just ran out of missiles and couldn't unblock the path anymore, and never finished that game. There were parts of it that it didn't really tell you how to beat. I think Angry Video Game Nerd has a episode on it where there's like a little gap in a floor. It's like the room, it was divided. It had like a floor, and you could see the bottom floor and the top floor at the same time. And the top floor, there's like a little gap, and it makes you think that you're supposed to like jump over it, but there's not enough height between the second floor and the ceiling for you to really get enough air to get over it. And I think one of his buddies was just like, oh yeah, you could just walk over that. And he was like, what? And he just like walks over it. And I never knew that as a kid. I just kept forcing the jump. Sometimes you can trick it and like jump from the bottom floor up to the top floor. And so just seeing that other people had gone through that same experience it made me feel a little bit better about myself. I felt less dumb. Felt a little bit more like Donatello in that moment, like a little bit smarter than everybody, but not really. I think as far as weapons go, Donatello probably has the most effective one, which is probably why he was so good in that arcade game. Just because it is the bow staff. I mean, if you can't get near the guy, how are you supposed to hit him, right? Yeah, Raphael has his size. He can try to like disarm you, but that's a lot of leverage in that stick, man. That's why, like, that's why the old dudes you always see walking around, they carry like the big stick. It's probably why Gandalf had the stick too, just keep everybody at bay. I try to, as far as the drawing goes, keep at least the heads kind of close to look like from the Jim Henson Creature Shop. Donatello's I'm not like super happy with, just like the mask and the eyes are a little bit off. He does have that like Kermit the Frog kind of mouth, which they all kind of look like Kermit the Frog a little bit. The way that the little nose part kind of like comes over the mouth. And here you see I move back into the white highlights. It really, it's almost too much white, but I think without it, they do look super flat. and I just wasn't really happy with how like flat they looked. You know, I think it needed something to kind of help them pop off the page, and that's the easiest way to do it, is those little white highlights. There we go with the green. I just use the same green from Leo. I just get the eyedropper tool and I pick a little spot until it highlights over a color I'm kind of happy with. I just color them in. I did give them all the red bandanas because that is the way that they were in the original comics. Even on the NES game, the cover for that, they were all in the red bandanas. I thought that cover was cool. Like, that was really cool artwork. I wish I knew who did that artwork for that cover, but the game I think was made by Ultra, which was, if I remember right, Ultra was a part of Konami. But it was really cool art. And I remember they had all, that was the first time I had seen them all really with the red bandana, because I never, like, as a kid, you know, yes, even though I was born around the same time that the Turtles were created, I wasn't old enough to read the comics, or my parents wouldn't let me, or mom specifically wouldn't let me read the comics. And so as I move my canvas around, hopefully it fixes itself soon, but my mom wouldn't let me like read certain comics, so I never got to experience that part of the Turtles until later in life. But I do remember the cartoon. I remember the cartoon, they all had like the different colors, so when I saw them on the Nintendo Entertainment System game cover and they all had red, I was like, is that a mistake? Like, what happened here? 'Cause in the game I believe they all have different color bandanas, but just on the cover it's in red. And then later I found out that they were all supposed to be red, and the cartoon showrunners wanted people to be able to identify them, because they all kind of look the same. And so if you couldn't identify them through their weapons, they're just like, okay, well, let's just give them different colors, which is cool. I like the different colors, but there's something about the red, like the uniformness of it, and the fact that like it kind of solidifies them as a team. Almost takes the individuality out of it, which can be good and bad, but they just look cooler with the red. I'm sorry. Like, they just really look cool. Here I go with the white. It's still called the G pen. If anybody knows why they call it the G pen, let me know. And man, I did not realize how long I kept. Now see, here's when I realized it. I'm like, oh man, I think I'm moving my canvas, and I'm like, oh no. And so I finally put it back. So that was like 2 or 3 minutes of the time lapse, which meant originally that it had to have been like 5 or 6, 7 minutes of me just not paying attention to the recording, which is okay, because, you know, you get to see where I'm actually drawing. It's not like you were missing any of the drawing from it. And here's where I started to become a little bit happier with the way the drawing looks. I was really, you know, kind of worried at first. I was like, man, I'm not really digging this. His pose isn't as cool, but it's still a very Donnie pose. He's kind of almost ready to go. You know, he's not as willing as Leo and Raph look to like get into the fight, but he's like, alright, well, I got my stick, so if we have to. Again, with his eyes, I did kind of want them to be a little bit more noticeable, but not quite. When we get to Mikey's like so goofy looking. He was the hardest one to draw, to be honest. Yeah, I think the part of this video is actually ending, so I'm gonna have to catch you guys next time. Bye, everybody.